The Sawyer Hannay Show.
Very excited to bring you our next guest, Miss Lauren Ash. She is a comedian from Canada. She lives out in LA. That's where she spends her time now. She is a comedian and stars in the role. She's the lead role in the show Superstore, which is on Netflix. I binged it twice, I think, during the pandemic before I even met Lauren. And yeah, she does a pile of other things. She has her own podcast. She's putting out music. She's on another show called Not Dead Yet. So she's doing all kinds of very interesting things in the world of comedy and television and podcasting and music. So can't wait to dive into it. All right. Welcome on, Lauren. Very happy to have you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what, you just kind of give me a rundown off camera, but what's going on with everything? I mean, you're such a busy freaking person. It's honestly, from the outside looking in, it's hard to keep up with, and I have no idea how you manage that within your schedule. But what's up?
You know, I appreciate you saying that, because people will say it to me sometimes and they're like, how do you find the time? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I find the time, to be honest. I guess the metaphor would be like, I'm on a runaway train. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's no brakes. Like I sometimes would want to slow down or stop it, but you can't. It's like a shark. If you stop swimming, you'll die. Yeah, it's wild when I start listing the things, but I'm in production on season 2 of Not Dead Yet, which is my show that's on ABC and Hulu in the States. Yep. I have my podcast, True Crime and Cocktails. We're into like 100 and, I want to say 30 some episodes, maybe more. They start to blur. And then I started a music career last year too. So those are the kind of like 3 big things happening currently, which, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's great. I am not good with idle time. And we've talked before in the past about like, I also have ADHD. And so I think that that's a part of it too. Like it's constantly wanting dopamine and really going to extreme lengths at times to find it, you know?
Right. Yeah. Like, do you find, you sign up for a bunch of things and then get overwhelmed and then you kind of get your time back and then sign up for more things? Or I find with myself, that's what I do. As soon as things are actually at like a healthy rate, I'm like, I got to add something, you know? And I feel like you're even busier than I am. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it maybe. It's possible. Yeah. I think for me, the one thing that I will give myself credit in is that I'm thinking of like 25 different ideas of things any moment of the day. So it's like, I should start this business. I should do this. I should do this show. I should start an art installation. Have I ever thought about photography? Like, it's like literally at every minute. And for me, it's typically all creative based, right? Like it's all different art forms and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The one thing I will give myself credit in is that I have learned to try and focus. So it's like, if you find something and you like it, let's stick with this. Let's maybe not buy the like $2,000 camera to start the photography career yet. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, let's maybe pause on like investing in large canvases for you to start expressing your art, with paint. So that has been one thing, but because of that, it's like within the different things, I will find different. So within the podcast, I was like, I can run our merch store. I'll figure that out. How hard could it be? The answer is, I mean, I know that I'm speaking to you, so you know how hard it is.
Yeah,
and I inadvertently opened an e-commerce business. I tried to do a merch page. I run a whole business now. So I've tried to at least stick within the few things that I'm doing and find different things within those themselves, as opposed to like continuing to spread the net, which is my instinct.
Right. And just like reinvent the wheel each time with each project.
Right.
Yeah. Everything I'm learning, and this goes against my personality, everything I'm learning from like reading business books, things like that, it's suggesting to like pick one thing and focus on it to death.
Yeah.
Personally, I find that somewhat unfulfilling because it just kind of gets vanilla and boring, you know? So I do like to change it up too, but I find that my bandwidth as I'm getting older, like I have less energy and stuff for everything. So now just like to try to remain disciplined, I'm trying to stick with just a few lanes. But in school, and I'm guessing you were like a really great student in school and paid attention really clearly. I was terrible. And that was my flaw, like through the educational system, was I was just freaking everywhere. But now I'm starting to realize, okay, the importance of focusing and niching down, things like that. When you were in school, was that just like a riot? Because you have the comedy, like the funny components plus the attention span components. That must have been just chaos.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was only diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, but looking back, it's so fascinating because I was really, really good in school. Like I pulled like really good grades. I was
Okay.
best all around student in my graduating class. But the truth was that it was really hard for me. Like I was exerting a level which you only know your own experience. I have no idea that the amount of energy that I'm expending to
Yeah.
try and study or try and complete a task is far larger than a typical person. I didn't know that. So I would be in these times where I would be in the school play, in my rock band, organizing all the school assemblies, studying for exams, having a part-time job, and then completely melting down
Right.
because I'm trying to A, do way too many things, but B, the schoolwork was so hard. And when it was stuff that I wasn't legitimately interested in, it was I always say, I'm like, it feels like getting your skin peeled off. Like it was, and so the discipline and kind of effort that I was exhibiting, again, now in retrospect, I look back and I have so much compassion for that young girl because it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, you pulled all the good grades, but everybody thought it was easy for you and it really wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you put that because I was the same minus the good grades. Like
Right.
it was such a struggle for me. And I'm a hardworking person. I was also distracted because I didn't really like school, but it goes back to not being interested in what you're learning. I didn't have the discipline at those ages to like just say, okay, listen, sorry, I got to get this shit done, so do it. I would zone out.
Right.
But yeah, you have to work so much harder. I remember being at hockey practice, which was something I loved, and struggling to pay attention to the drills. Like by the time the 3 minutes the coach used to explain the drill, by the end of that 3 minutes, I was in la la land. And then I'd
Right.
say, shit, I got to go do the thing. And I actually like this subject. So I really, really struggled with that too.
Yeah.
So what do you do does that build you up like in terms of energy or do you have to recharge and do something like watch TV or like how do you recharge or is that fueling you as you go like all these different things that you're doing?
It kind of depends on the day. I think, it's funny because people, my like television viewing habits are really basic. And I think that people's perception would be like, oh, have you seen The Bear? No. Have I seen every episode of Vanderpump Rules? Yes. And people think that that's like a personality thing. But what I've realized over the years is that, especially because my job is in television and in comedy, I'm like, when I come home, if I'm gonna recharge, I gotta zone out. I gotta find something that feels like a low level sedative. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like
Yes,
the
absolutely.
storylines aren't hard to follow. Because if I start to watch a comedy, my brain goes into writer mode, editor mode, actor mode,
Right.
going, I would have done this. I would have done that. That's
Right.
not funny. Oh, that's very funny. Oh, I would have stood here. Why did they block the scene that way? Where's the camera? And it's like, this isn't relaxing. Like, this isn't like,
Yeah.
this isn't entertaining or fun for me. This again feels like an extension of work. So yeah, I think, and that's been something, because I think there's such a stigma about watching reality television that a lot of people have. There's a lot of judgment, which whatever, do like what you like is my bottom line.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's more acknowledging that it's like, no, this is actually a part of my creative process. I need to have to force myself to come down. I need to have those times where I shut it off and I watch something inane. And no disrespect to the Vanderpump people. They're great people, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course. And it's escapism. And I'm the same
Yeah.
way. Like I'm going all the time and I can't shut my mind off. Like there's literally nights I take melatonin or something just to help shut my brain off.
Yep.
So I can sleep, so I can rest. But I enjoy escapism and mine is video games. And I feel guilty because like video games, it's like terrible for your brain. It's the least productive thing you can do, whatever. But that's how I can disconnect. Like if I'm if I'm there's either that or watching shows, and that's what actually led me to Superstore was just easy shows that you can watch in smaller doses. You're not committed to like a 2-hour movie. You can just watch it like here and there, things like that. What do you record on your podcast?
We just do it over Zoom. We do it over Zoom, and we record in GarageBand on our computers. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the band skills come in coming back to light through the
Come
podcast.
on. Always. It all feeds each other.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I know that we talked about a lot of your past, but just for the people that are new to you, walk me through. I know, you grew up in Canada. You just mentioned high school. Like, you didn't mention comedy in high school. Like, when did you get into comedy? I know you're a freaking workhorse and you were doing a lot of stand up and things. Talk to me a little bit about those early days of comedy and, after high school and before Hollywood.
Yeah. So I was definitely in school plays in like elementary school into high school. In high school, I did start to explore things comedically. There, I was on like the improv team and stuff like that. We were doing like little sketches at assemblies and stuff like that. I also had a very patient first period teacher who every Monday morning would let myself and one of my friends recreate a sketch from SNL that week. So like the cheerleaders were big at that time, or Mary Catherine Gallagher. I'm dating myself. It's fine. Aging is a privilege. But so that was when I really started to feel like I would get up in front of the classroom. It was French class too. So it was very kind that she was like letting us play. But we'd get up and we'd do like little bits and everybody loved them. And that was kind of a moment of like, oh, this is kind of amazing. So my goal around that time, probably when I was like 14, 15, was like, I want to do Saturday Night Live, period. That's it. That is the ultimate goal. And so then I just started researching, well, what happens? How do people get there? And the big thing that kept coming up was Second City. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So that kind of got on my radar that it was like all of the people who are amazing on SNL came from Second City. So I had a full scholarship to go to college and I chose to go to acting school and I had a terrible time. It was really intense. It was kind of like, it was built to kill. Like they basically were like, why don't we give these students more tasks than are achievable? So for me, who is someone that like, I'll use every hour, I'm going to do the thing, I'm going to hyper focus.
Yeah.
I would melt down because I'm like, but I actually can't there isn't enough hours. There actually isn't. And it was designed to kind of break you down mentally, which was really bizarre. And also I'm like, in retrospect now as an actor, I'm like, that served no purpose. That did not help. I don't see how that's going to make anybody a better performer or actor, so I dropped out. I dropped out after 3 months. I gave up, threw away my entire free ride scholarship. I was, of course, best all around student. Like I said, I was high school valedictorian. Like the idea that I would drop out of college at a university was
probably shocking to everybody around you.
Totally. Everybody from back home was like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
But I literally, I walked out of school, got on the subway in Toronto, went to the Second City and signed up for improv classes that day. Because I was like, this is what I really want to do. The one component of theater school I loved was the improv comedy component.
Yeah.
And I started taking classes within less than a year. I was hired to the touring company. I was 19. I was the youngest woman ever hired to the touring company at that time. Wow. The youngest man to date was Mike Myers. And so then I did that for 3.5 years. I got onto the main stage in Toronto at the Second City. I was very young. I did that for 2 years. And then I was like, I want to do.
You were 19 at that point?
I was 19 when I got hired to the touring company. And so then I got the main stage when I was 22.
Wow.
Which is very young.
Yeah, very young.
For that job, which was incredible. But then my sights were really set on Second City Chicago, being on the main stage there, because I knew that that's where the scouts come to scout for SNL. That's it. That's the goal. This is the path. These are the steps I got to follow. Right.
Yep.
And I somehow managed to do it. I got offered a job there. And I'm one of there's only 4 Canadians that have ever crossed over and done both the Toronto main stage and the Chicago main stage.
Wow.
So it's me, John Candy, Mike Myers, and a woman named Lisa Brooke, who's very talented in Toronto. And so I got there. I was like, I'm doing it. I'm making the dream happen. I'm manifesting or I'm putting in the work, however you want to label it. And then Lorne Michaels came to see one of our main stage shows. And I was like, this is it. I did it. I'm going to be on SNL.
Yeah. And
he watched the show. And then the next day we found out they were flying out the 2 other women that were in the cast with me and 2 of the guys. And I didn't even get an audition.
Oh, shit.
And so it was this massive life moment for me, because to that point, and at that point I was probably 2005, 2006, I was probably 23. I was like, what do I do? This
Right.
was the plan. This was the path. I'd
Yeah.
managed to make it happen, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And now it's gone. And some people could argue, like, well, you could have still had another opportunity to get another audition with them, which is not untrue. But I think for me, it was more, I have to take a new look at what my journey is going to be. It can't only be that one thing.
Right.
So I did 2 years on the main stage there. I moved back to Toronto. I worked in film and TV a little bit. And then I was like, I'll go out to LA. So I flew out to LA. I did a pilot season. I auditioned for something. I got very close. I didn't get it. Came back to Toronto. And then I got a call that they had made this pilot that I didn't get. I got very close, but didn't get. And that they had passed on it and they were making a new pilot. And they were like, we're interested in you again. So I flew back down. I auditioned another 4 times and then booked it. And that was a show called Super Fun Night, which was on ABC in the States, starring Rebel Wilson from Bridesmaids, Pitch Perfect, all of that fame. And so we did 17 episode season. That's what brought me to LA. I had a great experience. It was wonderful. I came off of that show. I did a Comedy Central series called Another Period. And then at that point, I was like broke, because when you get your first TV show, first of all, actors on American TV don't make what they used to make. So the stories that we used to hear from, the early 2000s, they don't really exist anymore. And when I was having to move to a new country and pay for a green card and get a car, all these kinds of things, by the time I was
expensive
done,
city as well.
Massive. So by the time I was done that show, I was broke. Right. Truly. And again, as somebody who was not living I wasn't being frivolous. I wasn't I'm typically really kind of a saver mindset in general. And so I got to this moment where I was like, I'm starting to go into debt. I don't really want to, I want to still be an actor. I don't want to get a part-time job at this point. I was like, I think I got to go home to Canada. I got to go back. And it was at that moment that I got sent the Superstore script for that pilot.
Oh, wow.
And I read it and I went, this is my part. I know her. When I was at the Second City in Toronto, I had created this character that's very close to Dina. So when I read that, I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. And I had to audition 4 times. They really, again, they like to put you through the ringer. But I said at the time, I was like, this pilot is going to get picked up. It's going to go to series. It's going to run for 7 seasons. We only did 6. But I was right every step of the way. And it was obviously a massively transformative experience for me as a performer, as a human. The show did well when we were in production and it was airing in real time, but it was obviously the pandemic. We had 5 seasons up at that point, for people to binge. And when it got put onto Netflix, it went onto Netflix everywhere in the world except the US. That was the day my life changed. That was the game changer.
When it dropped onto the US?
No, it's never been on Netflix in the US.
Never, still to this day, it's still not?
Still to this day. It's an NBC show, which means that it was on Hulu, and now it's on Peacock, which is the NBC Universal streamer. It's never been on Netflix here. So again, it was airing for years, but no one anywhere else had really ever heard of it because there isn't Hulu in Canada or Hulu's only in the US. So it was again this kind of moderately successful show for 5 years. And then it just internationally, literally overnight, explodes.
And that was when it hit the international Netflix platforms?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So an American Hulu is not comparable to Netflix? I don't really know the kind of the order of the platforms.
It's very popular here for sure, but I think that the power of Netflix, it was the original streamer, right? It was the first one. Yeah. It's a one that I think, especially internationally, if people are going to have one streaming service, typically they have Netflix. That's the choice. And I'd say the same is probably true in the US too. But I think that I had never kind of anticipated what that would look like how that would shift, what that would feel like. I had always been on shows that had done okay, that were doing well, but not, Right. And so that it was also very bittersweet because we had just gotten canceled literally about 2 weeks before the show went international on Netflix.
Because of COVID, because of the pandemic?
Right.
You guys did such a great job of including the realism of the pandemic in the last, 2 seasons or the last season.
The last season. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I thought that was really, really, like quick thinking on your feed or the producer's feed or whoever come up with that idea where you guys really incorporated. And then for us, like, cause that's where I discovered you and the show was through COVID. And then all of a sudden it's really relatable. The last season when we're watching it, it's like super relatable. It feels like it's like real time.
Well, and what's fascinating is so we were one of the first shows to go back. We were in Hollywood, I think we were the first. So we were back very quickly. It was still, and in LA at that time, it was like the epicenter of COVID. People were, I mean, it was chaos down here. It was really, and I would talk to people back home who were having a much different kind of experience. Yep. Here, there was, LA specifically, there was some time that it was like, this is scary. Like it was just the unknown. Nobody knew what was happening. And we're going back to work going, maybe we'll all be fine. Maybe we won't. We don't know. No one knew. Right. And so we were shooting in that time. So it really kind of fed the creative, if that made any sense, because we were having to figure out how to physically shoot. So it was like, how do we even do this? What does this even look like? Yeah. It was a gift in terms of story to be able to incorporate what was really happening in stores at those times, at that time. But it was wild. It really was happening in real time. We really were kind of going like, well, this is what's happening right now. Yeah. Let's put that in an episode. And it built as it went.
Was the urgency to continue filming during the pandemic because of this recent success of the recent surge of success of the show? And you guys are thinking, listen, we got to make hay when the sun shines. Like we have to get back after it. Or were you guys scheduled to shoot and then, or like, what did that look like?
Well, and this is prior to the show blowing up. So there was no, so literally it was, the pandemic it started March 2020. We went back in like August 2020, which was a lot sooner than most of the shows down here. And then we were, I think it was really the network. If I'm being completely blunt, I think they wanted to see if we could do it because we were supposed to go back sooner. We should have been shooting early July. We were going back like late August, maybe even early September. And so I think they were like, can we pull it off? Can the show must go on? Can we make the show go on? Right. And we did. And I remember it was December 2020. We had been shooting for months. We got this message from the network that was like, you proved to us how we could do, you were kind of the guinea pig for bringing shows back. But we are going to be canceling you. And it was such a devastating moment that it was like, we've all just been going through this very wild, unknown experience, right? Again, we didn't know how it was going to turn out either way. And you are rewarding us by canceling us, right? Which is a classic kind of, Hollywood story. So that was December 2020 and it went live on Netflix internationally, January 2021. So it was literally going through the kind of like devastation and grief that we all felt because we all really loved making that show. Yeah. And it was,
you guys look like a fun cast. It looked like you guys were having fun.
It was really, I often say, I'm like, my show right now too, Not Dead Yet is we have an amazing time. That cast is phenomenal. We deeply love each other. Superstore was just special. I've often said, I'm like, at the time I would always say like, guys, we make currency for this. Like we exchange, we receive money for what we're doing right now. Cause it was so fun. And I said at the time, and I still say now, I'm like, I think in the winter of all of our lives, anyone who is on that show will look back and go like, that was the one. That was the special one. So getting canceled was always going to be devastating if it was to happen, but certainly in that context, because it also COVID completely changed how we worked. We were a cast that was always together prior to that. We would, between takes on other TV shows, if they call cut, people may go back to their trailers. Right. They're not necessarily interacting. On that show, we were all together, whoever was there. We're hanging out, we're talking, we're eating, we're friends, we're family, by the end. And in COVID, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. So we were either forced to go back to our trailers or they would create this giant room with like dividers between each of us, plexiglass. We're all, and if we got too close, then there was a COVID officer being like, step away. Right. And that was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking that was the season we went out on. That it was like this thing that we had become family doing. Now it's like we can't even connect in the way that we normally did. So it was a real bummer. And then a real kind of like mind fuck that then it blew up all over the world.
Well, so they decided to cancel it before it blew up.
Yeah.
And you already had that last season. You already had the finale filmed.
Yeah.
So they couldn't really go back on it, right?
Right.
Even though, like, you know, it pops off, they might think, geez, maybe we should add another season. It was probably too late for that, right?
Too late.
Damn.
Too late.
Do you think in hindsight they would have yeah, I mean, of course they would have. After it popped off, they would have wanted to squeeze another season or two out, don't you think?
I don't know because it wasn't within the US. It was the international kind of market. And I don't know if we want to get into like the behind the curtain business of Hollywood, it's like, I don't know how much money that they make from that sale to Netflix.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
If it was a ton, then then there would be an impetus for them to want to create at least one or two more seasons. But to date, they haven't. So
yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, we always are pushing. Like the cast is always like, we got to do one more season, or we got to do a movie. Like I'm shamelessly, for any Superstore fans, just know I am shamelessly trying to make it happen.
A movie would be cool.
I thought a movie would be a great idea.
Yeah. That'd be a good compromise. You know, if they don't want to do a full season, do a movie. Do a 90-minute movie. Yeah.
90-minute movie. It would be so fun. The gang's all back together. Fast, funny. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that would be great.
No,
I love the show. And I watched it, I think, twice all the way through before we even met.
Right.
And I thought like the cast was great, but I thought you really carried the show. I thought you were fantastic. I thought you were so funny. And I loved one of the, maybe this is popular, I don't know, but for me, I loved your relationship with Sandra. I loved how like poor Sandra was so nice and kind and innocent, and Dina was so hard on Sandra, and I loved it. And just so blunt and straight to the point and like no nonsense.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite relationships in the show, was between you and Sandra.
Yeah, people definitely loved that relationship for sure. And it's so funny because Kaliko is like the most wonderful, lovely person, and I adore her. And people will see us in public together at times and be like, like people's brains melt because they're like, but she's so mean to her. And it's like, no, we're acting. But
damn it, Sandra. You were so hard on Sandra.
So hard on Sandra for no reason. But I always said at the time, I was like, Dina just smells weakness. Dina's like, she's like, if she smells weakness, she's like, she's turned on you already. Like you've already lost her. You know, like it's the reason why she respects Amy so much. There's times where she tells Amy outright, I don't like you, but I respect you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Early on. So with Sandra, it was just like, Dina was like, I don't respect her. She means nothing to me. She irritates me by her existence, you know? Yeah.
You communicated that really well through the role, because that's exactly how it was perceived. Honestly, it read. Oh yeah, it read. Absolutely. So how much of that character, like, how much of that character is you, or how much of that character is your creation versus like the script that was handed to you?
So definitely, I will say, even in my audition, I improvised things. So there was moments in the audition where I like threw in jokes. I remember I like wrote a whole new big joke at the end of the audition scene, which there is like varying kind of schools of thoughts about that in the acting world, where it's like, it's a bold move, like it's a big swing, but for me, it's always paid off. I think I do that in most of my auditions, to be honest. Always have. It's like, they're going to be hearing the same script 100 times today. If I can say something funny, that's going to make them remember me. Right.
Yep.
So the character came from, we did this thing at Second City in an improv set once where we went through the back of a Toronto Star and cut out classified ads, like dating ads, which were still happening in the 2000s in newspapers, which is weird. But mine said, woman who loves hard rock shows and roller coasters seeks platonic male friend for fun. And this is that's basically the character that kind of came out. And so that's how I approached it. And I know that the character was originally written a lot older than I was, but then when they saw me, like Mateo's character was written as like a Latino gang member. But then Nico Santos went in and was like, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to play a gay Filipino, which is who he is. And he was so funny that they were like, oh, that's the character.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, the credit I will definitely give to Justin Spitzer, who created the show, was he was just open to following what was funny.
Right.
So we improvised a lot. Mark McKinney and I, especially, who played Glenn, we improvised on that show
Yeah.
a lot. And they would use it. And on other shows I've been on, the creators and writers can be much more precious about you saying their words and making it, which is, by the way, their prerogative. But
Right.
one of the things that I think made Superstore magical, and that when people talk about how much they love the show and they can't put their finger on why it's different,
Yeah.
I think it's twofold. I think it was our relationships with one another in real life bled through. The chemistry bled through.
That was felt as a spectator.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised when you say that.
Yeah. And then the second was we were improvising. So there's always going to be things that you find in the moment that you could sit at a computer and type on for hours that are never going to come out. Right. It's just that like spontaneity, that energy. So definitely like she kind of grew with me. All of the characters kind of grew with the actors. There was pieces of all of us that I think kind of came in. Now, I would say that Lauren Ash, am quite different than Dina. I think that she is a lot more aggressive, militant, all of those things than me. I'm Canadian, you know this. Like I'm not, that doesn't really resonate. I am a rules person. I do like following the rules. I get anxious if people don't. So we definitely share that trait.
Yeah.
I also am a very loyal person, which I think comes through in her as well. But I think that's probably kind of where it ends. To be honest, I'm very inspired by her. I was very inspired by her as a character because she was so almost delusionally confident that to me, like she really believed that she was the hottest human being. She really believed that she was the greatest employee. She really believed those things. And I was often found myself being like, I should really take a page from her book. Like she really is like, she's got some things figured out, you know? Yeah.
She was like from an employer standpoint, that's who you'd want to hire. Someone that takes their job super serious, someone that's good, someone that holds everybody else around you accountable. Right. You know? Yeah. No, I thought it was great. It was a very, very strong character.
Thank you. Yeah. And I really think, again, it was working together. It was the stuff that they were writing, certainly, but then it was always a conversation. Because my main thing was I never wanted her to be two-dimensional. I never wanted her to seem like a sociopath. I never wanted her to seem like she had no feelings or didn't care. So you'll notice certainly going into like season 3, season 4, she has a bit of an emotional arc, which was really like, that was a lot of me going like, we got to give her some heart. We got to give her some feeling.
Right.
People love the character. They'll go with you, you know, like we've earned, you know, she's funny. She's all these things, but by season 3, season 4, I'm like, we can do some stuff where we get to see that other side. And that to me is where the character really started to shine because she just felt even more real to me. So I feel like it made it easier to kind of, not easier to play, but to connect in to where she kind of was centered.
Right. And then the love interest halfway through the show also humanized it too, right? Because then there's the fluctuations of that instead of just the very serious at my job type part, you know. Then you had the personal part with Garrett that you were balancing as well.
Right. And what that looked like. And then her trying to date someone else, but then ultimately, you know, exactly.
Yeah. No, it was cool. So do you still keep in touch? I seen on your Instagram, you were at, I think, a wedding, right? Recently with the crew?
Yeah. Last November, Nico, who played Mateo and married his husband, Zeke Smith from Survivor fame. And we were all there except America. The rest of the crew was all there. And it was so beautiful. It was such a wonderful, you know, reunion. But we had been together almost all of us for a dinner a month or 2 prior to that. And that was literally because I texted Ben Feldman and I was like, hey, camp counselor, it's time to plan a dinner. Let's go. He's really kind of like, he's the planner guy. The two of us are kind of, we co-produce those kinds of things. But yeah, we're still all in touch. I mean, I see Nico all the time. He's one of my closest friends. But all of us, I was on the phone with Mark, who played Glenn the other day. Like we're definitely, you know, we're 3 years out now. The show finished 3 years ago, but yeah, we're all on a text chain. We're all, you know, constantly in touch. Yeah.
Is everybody LA based? Or are they from all over? Or living all over?
Most of us are. America is in New York primarily, and Mark kind of splits his time between Toronto and LA. But then I think the rest of us are all here now full time. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is there any like kind of stories like when you're filming that, the regular viewer wouldn't know? Like any kind of inside kind of scoop or anything funny that happened, like, behind the scenes, things like that?
Yes, there is definitely. I mean, it was one of my favorite stories. This is so terrible. One of my favorite
It's a good
behind the
one
scenes.
when you're laughing before you even tell it.
I know. So Ben Feldman, who played Jonah on the show,
Yeah.
often gets compared to BJ Novak, who was on The Office. There's a
Yeah.
similar type there. And they both are aware of each other in real life. Like they both know that there is this comparison. And there will be times where things will happen and Ben will be mistaken for BJ Novak. And so, someone may feel a certain way about that.
Yeah.
So Colton and I planned the most elaborate prank on Ben, which was we went to every department. Now, for context, like a TV show, what you don't see is there's 200 people that work on a TV show behind the scenes. There's a multitude of different departments. And we went to every one and we planned for one day that the script would have his name changed to BJ Novak, the sign on his trailer door, his parking spot sign, the chair that has we all have chairs with their names on them. We had they had one of those specially made. We made it so that literally every single piece of anything that could have Ben Feldman's name on it would be changed to BJ Novak. And I was kind of waiting with my phone kind of down low so he didn't know that I was filming for him to get out of his car. He doesn't notice the parking spot sign. He doesn't notice the sign on his trailer door. And I'm like, damn it. But then he sees his side. So every morning there's a tiny little script that's waiting in your trailer that has all of the dialogue for the day in it. And on there, we even had them in the tiny print, change it to BJ Novak. And then he sticks his head out. And then it was the moment where it was the Matrix, he's seeing it all come together and he's seeing all the things. And he was so angry. He hated it so much. And then it was every time, then we got to set and there would be the chair with BJ Novak. And he was just it was so delicious to watch. And after the fact, he thought it was hilarious. But in the moment, I remember at one point, I was kind of following him, filming him. And he turned to me in his trailer door and goes, "Lauren, I love you, but go fuck yourself." And closed the door. And it was the greatest prank, man. It was just so, and he's such a, he's one of my closest friends. And it was amazing to watch a man just slowly break down over the course of the day. It's someone's biggest nightmare realized that it's everyone is mistaking you. Every department is mistaking you for somebody else. That's probably that was the biggest thing we ever pulled off for sure.
He must have appreciated the work that went into that.
He
Behind
did.
changing
Again,
the names on absolutely everything and getting things physically made with that name on it instead of just
it was a
sticking
metal
out over
sign.
something.
The sign for his parking spot is a metal sign that had to be drilled into a pole. When I tell you, every department rallied on this joke.
Oh, it
was so funny. And yes, after I think about 2 days later, he was like, "That was incredible." He was like, "Now that I see the scope of it, that was incredible."
Took him the 48 hours.
He needed just a couple minutes. He needed a couple hours to let it all just kind of percolate. But yeah, that one definitely took the cake for sure.
That's so funny. And
so funny.
Do you guys get compared to The Office often? I love The
time.
Office. Huge Office fan. I think we talked about this actually. We talked about the comparison between Dina and Dwight. I think we talked about that too, right? Or did I do that? Yeah. I see those similarities obviously, but even the format of the show, the workplace environment and things like that. I was a huge Office fan. And that also kind of influenced me starting and giving Superstore a chance. Cause I'm actually somebody that watches the same damn show over and over. I don't really like trying new things that often, but for those reasons I was like, yeah, I'll give Superstore a chance. And for those reasons, I actually enjoyed it even more because I could reflect off both shows. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes sense because Justin Spitzer, who created Superstore, was a writer and producer on The Office. So he came from that world.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there's going to be similarities for sure, just in terms of Superstore is kind of like The Office set in a big box store. I feel like that is a fair comparison. People definitely compare it a lot. Definitely get a lot of Dina Dwight which for me was interesting because I was a huge fan of the British Office and I never watched the American Office. And I never talked about that in press because I was like, I don't want people to think that like I think something negative of the show. I don't.
Right. Yeah.
It was just, I loved the British one. I never got into the American one. There's a lot of TV. There's a lot of shitty reality shows to get through. But so I had no frame of reference. So for anyone who thought that the character was inspired by Dwight or was trying to be Dwight, that may have been the case with the writing. But in terms of me and my performance, I had no frame of reference because I'd never watched it. So I knew who he was and I knew obviously, but it wasn't like I was trying to be him at all. And I think that wasn't
the impression I got. Yeah, that wasn't the
okay,
impression
good. I appreciate that. Yeah. Because I think that, it's an honor to be compared to him. That's an iconic character that people love. I understand the comparison too. The other thing I would offer is just that I do think that on paper, broad strokes, very similar. But when you really break down those characters, now that I have started watching The American Office, because I've started now, obviously, I'm just like, a million years late. When I see the two of them, I'm like, they're similar, but they are very different. I think there is a very kind of different inside to both of those characters, which is beautiful. They're both great, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you watched the British version and then took your time for the American version. So I have an older cousin that went to school in Sweden at one point. So he was watching the UK version, like I think as it came out, and he doesn't like the American version because his impression of The Office is the UK version. My impression of The Office is the American version. So I can't tolerate, like I couldn't get through a full episode of the UK version as hard as I tried. But is now that you've, I guess, tasted both, are the characters I know the Michael Scott similarities, but is there a Dwight type character in the UK as well that's like a Dina, like a Dwight?
Yeah, his name is the character is Gareth, and he's definitely that kind of character. But again, a different temperature, a different flavor as well. Like very similar, but very unique. Also, he was played by this actor whose name is leaving me, but who's physically quite gangly, quite skinny, had a weird bowl haircut, but then was also super into talking about the military and stuff like that. So again, just another take on a similar kind of type. There's definitely, you can see all the different characters that are there. They're all kind of there. It's just, again, to what degree. And it's also the US sensibility versus the UK sensibility. They're very different. And I think it was hard for me to go to I never was drawn to go to the American Office because I loved the British one so much.
Right.
And David Brent as a character for me was a touchstone, a pinnacle of comedy for me. So it was difficult for me to go. Now, again, Steve Carell is doing something very different. They're similar, but very different, But I can also understand it's difficult to go the other way too. When you're used to the one, going to the other one, it feels like, what is this? But for me, the British one is just a lot, in some ways, a lot darker. It's a lot more gray almost in tone, if that makes sense, which I love. I love when it feels like it's this is funny, but
kind of messed up,
but also dark. Exactly. You're rooting for this person that you really kind of dislike. And I don't feel like the Michael Scott character, to me, I haven't watched all of it, but is as unlikable as David Brent. David Brent's a pretty unlikable character. And that was interesting to me, that it was I'm rooting for this guy that I also think is kind of awful, but I really find myself rooting for him,
Yeah, I don't know if I heard it or read it or just talked, because some of my friends are obsessed with The Office like I am, but it come up that Steve Carell wanted to add a sensitive side to his character because he didn't just want to be cold the whole way through.
Yeah.
Right. So he wanted to add that. And in the American Office, you feel for him. There's some heart-wrenching parts of that show that you really feel for that guy, because it's just, he can't get out of his own way, and you feel for him. And then there's a love component. I don't want to ruin the show for you. I don't know
right
where you are, but there's a love component and there's ups and downs to that you feel for him. So you definitely have empathy for the American Michael Scott, for sure.
Right. And I think the interesting thing about the British version is that it was only 2 seasons plus the Christmas special. And there's only 6 episodes per season. So there's
I didn't know that. So there's 13, 14 episodes. Okay.
14 total. 14 total. So what's interesting too is that season 1 of the British one, you kind of see David Brent succeeding. Like he's kind of like this weird and kind of off-putting guy, but he's kind of succeeding at what he does. And then season 2, you just watch him fall.
Gotcha.
And so it's this real kind of, it's more acute, if that makes any sense, than the American version, which had seasons upon seasons to explore all of these things. They took a lot more time with it, which again is a US kind of normalcy versus a UK normalcy. UK, they always have short seasons and short runs. So I think that that's part of what it was for me too, is that you are watching someone just falling downstairs so hard, so fast. You watched him kind of get to the top and then just eat shit going down. So that feels inherently darker, if that makes sense, where it's like, oh, we're really watching this guy just plummet. Whereas again, I feel like the US version kind of allowed you to go on more of a journey in kind of ups and downs and ebbs and flows, which I can also understand being more palatable to watch in some ways. But for me, it was, I really liked watching him fail.
You mentioned like the runs of shows and the different, like, I didn't realize the UK just generally had shorter shows. Do you feel that a show can kind of wear itself out? Like in the sense where it's like, I know this is your industry, it's not mine, so I don't mind saying it. Like, I feel like The Office ran a little bit too long. When Michael Scott was out, I still loved it because I love Dwight. He held the show together. Or maybe Vikings is a different example. Vikings was really good. The main star dies at the end of season 4, and the next like 3 seasons were really terrible, but I was committed because I watched the first 4, so I wanted to finish, but it was painful. Do you find shows kind of bleed themselves out and they should have ended earlier, or what's kind of your opinion on that?
I do think, I think the Brits, they really air the other way, where a lot of the shows historically, especially comedies, are like 2, maybe 3 seasons and that's it. And again, only 6 episodes per season. I think there's something interesting about that because it really leaves you wanting more a lot of the time. It's like, oh, I wish there was more of that. And I think in some ways, as an audience member, I prefer that. As an actor, of course, I'd like to be on the show that runs 20 seasons. Right. But I will say that I do think you can feel it. And I think sometimes it takes a show a little bit of time to find itself in the beginning. So you want to give it a few seasons to like really get there. And then it feels like once you've gotten to the sweet spot, it's nice to let it run for a few more years. But then it does reach a point. I think personally, it's like season 8, season 9 of anything, we're starting to sputter, like, and I say that with nothing but respect, but I think it's just a reality. And it doesn't mean that show shouldn't get made. It's still answering a want. Audiences want it. They want to see more. I respect, and again, would love to be on a show that continues to run that long. But Superstore to me is a great example because we did 6 and I was like, we needed one more.
Right.
I think we could have done a couple more, but I really felt like our song is not sung yet. I really felt like it was like, we got another one in our tank that we could really knock it out of the park. Post-COVID, not dealing with just all of the protocols physically involved in us working. I would have really liked us to have one more. Do I think it should have done 10, 11, 12 seasons? No. I think that anything is going to run its course.
Right.
I think anything's going to run its course. Typically, it's like Grey's Anatomy, one of the longest running, hour longs. Wonderful. I'm a fan of that show. But if you watch it long enough, you start to see that it's like, oh, this is exactly like in season 3.
Right. Because the patterns repeat. Yeah.
They have to, right? Like there does feel like in a world where there is infinite possibilities for writing, in some ways, there is still a cap, if that makes any sense.
Well, there's probably only so many good ones. Like, of course, there's infinite ideas, but how many really good ones are there, right? And that that our audience tested, because if they loved it in season 6, it's like, well, let's repeat that type of pattern in season 12 because we know it worked in season 6.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, again, I think the sweet spot to me is like 7, 8 seasons. I think that shows, especially comedies, that's nice. It's a nice run. You really feel like you got a full story kind of there. But I think once we start getting up into the double digits, it can kind of be diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you get casted to a show like Superstore, like what does that look like? You mentioned 4 auditions. Like what does that process look like from start to finish? Like if somebody wanted to get into acting, assuming they have the talent, like how would they get their foot in that door? Like what does that look like?
So you have to have representation. So, you know, in Canada, you kind of just have an agent, and that does the job for you of an agent and a manager. But in Hollywood, you really kind of need an agent and a manager. Now, again, there's exceptions to every rule. People have one or the other sometimes, but the way that the industry is kind of set up is that you have agents who are looking for work for you, and then you have managers who are ensuring that A, the agents are doing their job, and that B, everyone in the industry who should know about you knows about you. So
Yeah.
to take a step back for a second, like, you know, I did Super Fun Night, for example, which was a major network show. I was like, I got to try and capitalize on this as much as I can. So I started, you know, taking meetings with anybody. So my manager would set me up meetings with like different casting directors, different executives at different networks.
Yep.
This is a part of the industry that I feel like nobody talks about, and that is such a huge part of your job. So, you know, there's like weeks on end where literally my job is to like go into an office and be charming. And your literal only job there is to just try and be memorable, so that when that executive or that casting director has something else that comes up, they'll think of you.
Right. Right.
Which is wild, right? That it's like, it's basically guerrilla marketing, self-promotion is basically what you're doing.
Mhm.
So if you're doing that, then that kind of works in tandem with your agent who's looking for opportunities, who's going through all the breakdowns, finding the roles that could work for you, etc.
Right.
So for me, coming off of Super Fun Night, which we did do a full season, that usually kind of like will put you into the next category where you're going to be on more people's radars. You're going to, you know, people are going to trust that they can just bring you into a producer session, and I'll break that down in a second. And kind of bypass the first step. Now, that didn't happen for me on Superstore. So basically the way it goes is that if you're an up and coming or new actor and you get an opportunity to audition, you do something called a pre-read. So what that means is you go into the casting director's office and you literally read with the casting directors. Sometimes it's not even filmed. And this is them going, well, we don't know you and we don't know what your abilities are, but we'll
Yep.
give you a chance.
Yep.
If they like you, then you get sent to a producer session, which again, typically, if you've done a season of a comedy, a half-hour comedy, you can kind of bypass the pre-read and they'll just take you to a producer session where you go into a room and you audition for all of the producers of the show. Now, the casting director who cast the Superstore pilot was not aware of who I was. So it was like, we absolutely won't give her a producer audition. She has to come pre-read. And I was like, I don't care. You know, some
Yeah.
people would be deeply offended by that. I don't care. I was like, I want to get this job and I know that I am right for this part. And
Yeah.
I remember going in and reading with her, and we did the first scene of 2. And then she was like, I can't even make eye contact with you. You're so good. I'm so sorry that she's like, I'm so sorry I've done this to you. Can you come back tomorrow and read for the producers? And I was like, of course. I proved my point. That's like some good old fashioned Canadian passive aggression. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, oh, okay. You don't think I'm good enough? Well, I'll come in there and show you that you're wrong.
I'll show you. Yeah.
I'll show you. So that's the first 2 steps. If the producers like you and they think that they really want to cast you, then usually you're one of between 2 and 5 actors that get asked to screen test. So what that means is you go in to one of the big studio lots here in Hollywood and you all sit shitting your pants in a waiting room as you get mixed and matched with different people for the other roles. So typically I've been on, you know, I've had screen tests where it's me and one other person. I've had screen tests where it's me and 4 or 5 other people. Typically it's like 2 to 3.
Right.
And you'll go in and you'll have a work session, which means in the afternoon, and then, for example, maybe there was like 3 actors reading for the Jonah role. You'll go in and work with each of them and kind of rehearse.
It's just luck of the draw if you get set up with the actual Jonah that was chosen, right? So you could have been with like a secondary Jonah, basically.
Totally. And sometimes they'll all be there, like all the finalists are there. Other times that actor is already cast, so you'll read with the person who's already cast. That wasn't the case in this show. But for me that day, they didn't really mix us up with other people. It was more just about you go in, you work with the producers for a couple of hours, you work the scenes, they give you notes, and then you get hooked up to a microphone, there's a camera, and you go into a mini theater type room.
Yep.
And it's 100 people in suits. who all have their arms crossed, and it's all of the studio execs. So every television show has a studio that produces the show and the network that airs the show. Sometimes they're the same. Oftentimes they're not. So this first screen test is a studio screen test where you have to go in and perform for all of the executives that work, in this case, for example, at Universal, which was the studio for us.
Okay.
The pressure is intensely high. You really have to, you really have to have a certain constitution, I think, because it's really nerve-wracking.
So are
to
they
go
standing
in.
over you to critique you, or are they just there to kind of see, oh, this is the show that's, potentially working with, are they sitting there being critical, or
Yes.
is it more of a casual watch? No, it's okay.
It's a critical watch. Oftentimes you get told that they will not laugh. You get told, do not expect laughter. The studio,
Really?
by the way, and the studio is nicer and easier because they want the show to go than the network, which if you get past the studio test, then you go to a network test, which is the same thing, but it's typically even bigger, and it's all of the network executives. And they want you to prove them wrong. That's the whole thing.
Right.
Show us
so
why
they
cast
don't
you.
want to laugh on purpose. Like, even if you're funny, they'll try to hold it in.
Correct.
Just to make it difficult. Okay.
So, for example, this is a story I don't think I've told publicly, so you'll enjoy this. I had a screen test once for a show called The Odd Couple, which was starring, rest in peace, Matthew Perry. And I went in for the work. So
you guys
I did
would have been so funny together.
I know.
You and Matthew Perry.
I know.
Oh.
Well, wait for this story because you can watch it. This is my David Brent falling down the stairs. So I audition. I do the pre-read. Great. I do the producer session. Great. I get the screen test, the studio test. I go in. I do the work session. It's great. We do the studio test. It's great. It's with Matthew Perry.
Wow.
So I'm reading with him. At the end of it, he looks at me and he was like, that was great. And his eyes, man, were those like really blue, the ones that are almost like ice, like the sparkle.
Blue.
And I was just like, I know why you're a TV star. Like, it was just like, it was disarming. Like, I was like, he's so funny and he's so beautiful in real life. Anyway, but I did it. I killed it. Literally, the studio's calling me going, you fucking killed it. You're the choice. The role is yours. You just got to do the network test. Just do the network test. Great. So I go in, I do it. I'm like, hell yeah, I leave it all on the field. And then the casting director comes out, and it's just me and one other girl who are testing. That's it. And he goes, the network says they want it to feel more real, whatever the fuck that means. Okay, go ahead. And I was like, wait a minute, what? I don't even understand the note. Make it feel more real.
Right.
What do you mean? Grounded? Do you mean, like, what are you talking about? And I went in and I stepped to start the scene, and the lines flew away. And I was like,
no.
I'm so sorry. I need to start over. At that point, I feel like I was still in the running. I stepped out again. It's gone. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I need to start over again. And I felt I lost the whole room. I felt it.
No.
And I restarted a total of 4 times. The final time I got through it. And I remember looking into those icy blue, beautiful eyes. And he just went, thanks. Like, he was like, you blew it.
Oh, shit.
And I blew it. And the studio fought for me. They showed the studio, because they tape everything, right? So they showed the network, the studio test tapes, but didn't matter. I lost it. So that was it. But but listen, I mean, again, that had to happen so that then I got then I got Superstore. Like, it's in the journey.
This was before Superstore.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but again, it's like, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the faint of heart. It's very kind of, the pressure is to a level in those scenarios that I don't know. I can't liken any other part of my job to it. It's so high, and it's yours to lose, and you can watch yourself lose it. You can, like I did. I was like, I watched myself biff it.
So was that nerves or was that pressure? What do you think? Because I mean, you've been doing stand up. You're comfortable in front of a crowd. You're comfortable in front of cameras. Like, what do you think in that moment caused that to happen?
I think it was that I was given no time to process the note of be more real. I didn't understand the note fully. And so then I got thrown back in there, and I was just in my head. I was like, well, how do I implement that note on each of these lines? Right. If they'd given us 5 minutes, if they had said, this is the way they want it, take a few minutes and then come back in, I think I would have been fine. But it was the fact that I was trying to process and implement a note that I didn't fully understand in real time. And then it's like the ADHD thing where then it's just the tornado.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm like, and I can't stop it. I can't ground right now because the pressure is so high. And I have 100 people with their arms crossed staring at me going, let's go. And it just
I'll never forget. I had a similar experience, much smaller scale. I wasn't working with Matthew Perry. I was in university and I was invited to speak at this thing. I was like a fill-in to speak at this thing, but it was the day after St. Patty's Day. And I was already half cut with my buddies, St. Patty's Day university, like, wearing all my green, whatever. Yeah. So in my half drunken state, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Sounds like an opportunity, which on any other day, that's a good opportunity. Step in and speak in front of a large group of business people and all this stuff in the community. There was like 100 people and it was all like successful business people. Right. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll accept it. And I was drinking. I was like, well, I'm half drunk. It's St. Patty's. I'll get fully drunk. No worries. I'll jump on the bike tomorrow, early in the morning, sweat it out. I'll be ready. And this was my first actual taste of like anxiety. Because the next day, here I am trying to sweat out these booze. But as people do the night after drinking, you feel anxious. You don't feel quite yourself. You're not as sharp upstairs. Your memory's not as good. Your like self-confidence isn't as good. So I had a similar spiral. I got up on stage and I bombed it. And it was embarrassing. It was cringy. I'm cringing now just telling the story. And I got up and I got through it, but it was like so uncomfortable for me. I'm sure everybody was uncomfortable in the audience. It was terrible speaking experience. And when I sat down at the table and I was done, I said, I'm never, ever having a drink alcohol again before I have to like be in front of a group. And I haven't to this day, because I learned that lesson. But when I get up there, is kind of what you described, the tornado of you start overthinking everything, and then you're not fully focusing on what's supposed to be coming out of your mouth, right? Because you're looking around, you're like, I'm bombing this, that's going through your head. I'm making a fool of myself. Shouldn't have drank last night. Should have did this. Should have, and then all of a sudden you bomb. But those are good learning experiences too, right?
Totally.
I'm sure you learned and became better at your profession because of that experience.
Yeah. And also, there's a beauty in really failing. There's a beauty in feeling what that feels like, because I think, there's some people that can get quite successful and maybe, I think it may be a fallacy to say that people haven't failed to get that far. I think that, that's the growth, and that's the like character building and all of those things, and getting very close to something that is very valuable to you. Like being on a show with Matthew Perry would have been life-changing. Right. So, on every level. And so I think it was another one of those moments for me, like the moment where I almost, like Lorne Michaels saw me perform and didn't give me the SNL audition, like getting this opportunity and getting so close, like being told you're the choice, like you're the one, you just have to do it one more time. And then failing, was, again, it's like a benchmark in terms of like the journey of my career. And I wouldn't trade it ultimately, because again, it had to happen. So then then the next one. And here's the other thing. You can't rattle me in one of those rooms now. I'm just like, I'm a laser, like it's at this point, it's like,
you're Dina.
You gotta be Dina. That's you gotta tap into your Dina. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was the thing too, right? Like when I went through that Superstore process during the tests, I was like, I'm so connected to this character, and I'm so in the belief that my interpretation of this character is correct, that even if they threw me a curveball, I am going to stay true to what I believe that this character is.
Right.
And that's not me saying I wouldn't take the note, but what I'm saying is that I think at that time, that other character I was playing with in the Matthew Perry show, I didn't necessarily feel as connected to, through no fault of anybody's. It's kind of the nature of the beast, right? So it was like, no, this, you can't flap me now. You throw anything at me and I'm going to be cool.
Yeah. You were like operating with conviction. You knew exactly who you were, what you were, and how to be. Yeah, exactly. Just like subconsciousness or something was guiding you.
Totally. Conviction is a great word for it. I love that.
Yeah. I found that with speaking, or like when I went on Dragon's Den, obviously pretty nervous thing to do. And in school, I mentioned earlier, I was a terrible student. So like whenever I would do like a school presentation, I was terrible at it. But what I realized in university and then Dragon's Den in the real world, was when you know something front to back, you build the confidence. So if you
Yes.
prepare enough, you're going to just have that confidence. Like, even if you start out as like a super nervous person, speaking in front of a group, for example, if you know the content of what you're speaking on, or in your case, if you know that character with conviction, you're going to be more confident, and it's going to flow. And I think that's why, like, the preparation is so important, like even to almost over prepare in some cases. So you just know it front to back. And that's probably why people, like, there's method actors, right, that just never get out of character, because they just get married to that and they know it like the back of their own hand.
And I think the other part of it too was like, I really, and this wasn't like me trying to manifest or trying to tell myself, like, I just really did believe that I was going to play that part. Like it never entered. There was no doubt. I never had a like whisper of, oh, maybe you should. No, it was from the very beginning, from the first time I read it, I was like, that's my part. I just really believed it. And I don't think that that's something that, I think there's so much kind of like new agey kind of self-help type stuff, which I love, by the way, but that would talk about trying to do that. And I think the difference for me was that it wasn't that I was like, I'm convincing myself of this. It was truly that I knew it and believed it. The conviction was not only in the character, but within my knowledge I was going to play that character. So it really is impossible to get thrown at that point. But again, some could argue that's also borderline insane, Lauren, which I get. Like, it's like, and who knows, maybe they'll all be like that. Maybe they won't. I think it'll be a mixture of both. I think there's opportunities that will come to me now that I don't necessarily connect to in that way. And there's ones that will. And that's just, again, part of the overall journey of this weird job I do.
Right. And you've done, I had a buddy, I told him that I was going to be interviewing you today, and he's really interested in like voice acting. He's hilarious. But you did some voice acting as well, right?
Yeah.
So what do you like? How do you like that work compared to acting? Like, where does that fit in?
So I did a lot of like commercial voiceover work, and then I also did some Canadian animated series when I was living up there, circa 2005 to 2010-ish, as I was kind of back and forth to Chicago. And then coming down here, it was really hard to break into. It was really, I felt like I had
that's a competitive space.
Big time. Back home, I felt I was quite successful. I mean, there was years when I was an actor and I was making like my bread and butter was voice work, was especially like doing voiceover commercials. For like Absolute Vodka, like that kind of stuff. I did a lot of liquor ads. Yeah, a lot of liquor ads. Grand Marnier. I don't know. It just became my hit. But yeah, coming here.
I can see why.
Thank you so much. Coming here, it really was hard to cross over. Like, there's a lot more competition. In LA in general, there's so much more competition. But I definitely was surprised that it was like, I thought that my resume was kind of like pretty stacked, and it really didn't matter at all. So it took me many years here before I was able to kind of get into the swing. And then I booked She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which was a Netflix animated show that we did 3 seasons, 4 seasons. I can't remember. They all blur together in the animation world. But that was kind of helpful. And then I started kind of doing guest stars on different things here and there. And then the big one for me was I was the lead on an animated show called Chicago Party Ant on Netflix as well. And so that was, that's been an interesting part of the journey for sure, because it's great work. I mean, you go in, you don't have to memorize anything. You can wear your pajamas. You don't have to have your hair and makeup done. Right. And, in 20 minutes, you can bang out an entire episode of television. Like, the work is, I'll say it, it's cushy. It's fun. It's like,
it's probably why it's so competitive.
Exactly. And you don't have to fall into the category that you fall into is your voice. So it's not like your age matters. Somebody who's,
or your look, or your,
exactly.
Okay.
So there's a lot more kind of a wide berth for people who, someone booking a voice ad, the same person could be 25 to 60. It could be anywhere in there, right?
Yep.
And you would have a similar timbre to your voice potentially. So it's a really, really competitive market down here. And I will say that I was also shocked that it doesn't pay as much down here as I was thinking. I would make more doing voice ads in Canada for products than I do here. And I have a resume now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Why is that? Is it
I
just
have
because the
no
market's more
idea.
saturated in
I
the
think
US?
so.
Or? Yeah.
I think so. I think it's that there's so many more people that they know that they can pay less and somebody will do it.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Back
interesting.
home, if there's a voice you really want and it's somebody who's got like, a little bit of experience, then you can negotiate. Then you're the performer has a little bit more negotiating power. Than here it's like, yeah, it's been interesting. It's been interesting.
Yeah. One funny voiceover role that cracks me up is Seth Rogen was the voice for the train system in Vancouver for a while.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so like his like iconic like giggle laugh. I'm not going to try to do it and embarrass myself, but you know what I'm talking about. And like he has a distinctive voice, so he was part of the subway system. He was like the voice, like, okay, we're stopping at this station, whatever, and it was just Seth Rogen.
That's so funny. I love that so much. If the TTC in Toronto ever wants to rebrand and have Dina do it, I just want them to know I'm very open.
Yeah. Oh no, that's too funny. So what,
So
like,
funny.
I guess for my buddy, selfishly, like if you were to advise someone that's just looking to get into that, like what are the first steps to get into voice acting? Is it a similar process like with the auditioning and all that to traditional acting, or?
A little. It's a little bit different. What I would honestly recommend more than anything is to sign up for like a voiceover class. And I think that the one good kind of silver lining that came out of the pandemic is you can do anything online now with anybody in the world, right? So there's Zoom classes and everything. And that would really be my suggestion is take a class either in person or if there isn't anything in your city, look some up online because again, all of these places are doing Zoom stuff, obviously. And what you can do is there's different workshops you can do, but then some of them, by the end of your kind of like whatever you pay for, like 4-hour session, you walk away with a voice demo. So you're working with someone. Again, I would suggest taking just a general class first, get a vibe for it, get a feel for it, then do a workshop, a one-on-one, and lots of different places. If you Google offer these, that by the end of it, you'll end up with a demo. And then you can submit that to different voice agents. And there's different kind of resources online where you can kind of find who is reputable and who isn't. And then you send that out. And that's kind of like the first step. That's kind of more like your resume when you're starting out in the voice world is having a demo reel. I keep making it look like I'm holding a CD, which I realize is so antiquated now. It should be a USB key. But yeah, that's definitely the way to start.
The difference between this and this is big. It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
Such a big difference.
Every inch matters.
It does. Absolutely. But yeah, that would be my suggestion is again, like take look for resources and take some classes and then get a reel cut together to submit to people. And then because you have to have an agent to kind of get those opportunities.
To get those roles.
Really. Yeah.
Okay.
And there is something called Actors Access. I don't know if we have it in Canada. It's in the States. And it's something that where you can, if you're an up and coming actor, you can submit yourself for acting roles in like short films and student films and sometimes bigger productions as well are on there. Yeah. I want to say they have probably voice opportunity on there as well, but don't quote me. It's but there's a lot of great, and that's the big thing across the board. A lot of people always ask me like, how do you get started? Like, what should you do? And like, my biggest suggestions are take some classes. And I know people hate that because they're like, well, I'm whatever. Like, why do I need it? And I'm like, look, like I've still taken classes half the time. Like, you can't ever have the ego about knowing everything there is to know. And I think that it can really be also a great way to find out if you really like it. Because the other thing I say to people, and people hate this advice, but my number one piece of advice is, if you think you want to be an actor and there's anything else that you could do that would make you happy, do that instead. Because it is not easy. And it is a commitment of time and life that is all encompassing. Now, if you feel like you want to be an actor and you're like, it is the only thing I can imagine doing that would really bring me joy, then go for it as hard as you can. Go for it because that's what you have to do. But I think for some people, they have a perception of what this job is, and what the perception is versus what it really is are very different. And there's a lot of non-glamorous aspects. I often say to people, because people say like, you live your dream. And that's true. But I live my dream for 45-second long chunks in a day on a set, where then I spend 12 hours sitting and waiting. And I'm not complaining. It's not a complaint. But in terms of like the amount of effort and time and work that goes into getting, what adds up in a day to being like maybe 45 minutes of acting on camera is a lot. The split is like 98-2. You know what I mean? So it's like there's just a lot that goes into it where you really gotta really believe and love and know that there's nothing else that you could be doing to bring you joy.
Yeah, you're not the first person I heard say that. Because it's long days, and even I'm a big fan of Jim Carrey. And he spoke about the Grinch role and how it was like, I don't know, like 6 hours of makeup and like all the hair. It was like real animal hair and like all that whole process just to get ready to start the workday, basically. Right.
Yeah.
Like
he was doing like 10 to 12 hours in the chair.
Yeah, there you go.
To start.
Just to get started. That's madness. Like you'd have to be half crazy I could not sit in a chair for more than 20 minutes, let alone that long. Like that's just, and that role, that Grinch role is untouchable. Like it was unbelievable. I watch it every year, like faithfully. It's so good. And, to know what actually went into that production in the sense of what he had to sit there and endure day after day after day to film that is just crazy.
Yeah. I loved that when he was talking about the solution that the movie studio had was to bring in the like CIA trainer that like trains you to like endure torture. I was like, that's a level of commitment. And I agree. I watch that movie every year too. I love it. That performance was unmatched. But as somebody who does this for a living, especially, like what I can say is like, I can't fathom it. I cannot fathom. I can't fathom it. I can't imagine what that would be like. And doing it for months. Months. Because you got to think too, it's like if he's in the chair for 10 hours, there's only so many hours you can even shoot that day legally.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're working at such a slow pace at that point to try and get that move. Oh, yeah. I that would drive me to madness for sure.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Is there actors like Jim Carrey or comedians that you kind of look up to or looked up to in your early days?
Jim Carrey is a big one for me, actually. It's interesting that you brought him up because he is someone who started in comedy, obviously, and then I love his crossover stuff. Like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is my favorite movie of all time. I love the drama that he's done. I love hearing him speak about the world and about like his kind of like, he's got some real out there. His brain works in a real interesting way. And I find him as a human and his whole journey, I find very inspiring and very interesting. And in the Man in the Moon documentary, Jim and Andy, I don't know if you've watched that on Netflix. I've watched it so many times. I'm fascinated by it. As somebody who like, I'm not a method actor, I find it really intense. And I think it would make me feel a little bit insane. For me, I'm like, I think at the end of the day, I need to power down. I need to not be in character 24 hours a day. I found that all of that footage fascinating, but then also just hearing him speak. And there was things that he was saying that even though I'm obviously not on his level at all, there was things that he was saying that really resonated with me. And like the concepts of him saying, he's like, I was the most famous person in the world. I have everything you could ever want. And I was still not happy. And I really experienced that too. I remember, when I booked Super Fun Night, I'd kind of been telling myself my whole life, like once you get a big TV show, in my mind at the time, it was SNL. But like, then when I pivoted, it was like, you just got to get a show. You just got to get a show and then you'll feel happy. Then you'll feel happy. And that was the thing I kept telling myself. And then I did it and I got the show and it was amazing. And I was happy for that, but it didn't change anything. I was not suddenly a fulfilled, happy person. So I think that that's a big part of this career, surely any career, but certainly this one, where the work is tied to childhood dreams, where the work is tied to like, how could you possibly be unhappy? You succeeded at the thing that no one succeeds at. And what I can tell you, again, him saying it at his level and me saying it in mine is that it's a job that requires a 110% commitment from you in every aspect of your life. And then when you get the success, you realize, my goodness, I have to make some changes. I have to have some balance. I have to have some other things feeding me. And in my case too, as someone, as we said at the beginning, who doesn't stop and is doing way too much, what I will say to that though, is that those other things do bring me joy. So it's also trying, like the music that I do and stuff like that, that's just purely me feeling alive.
Right.
And I didn't always do that. So those are the things also that are, I think, important that you don't necessarily
Right.
realize when you're grinding.
And there's a quote that always stuck with me from Jim Carrey. I'll paraphrase because I won't get it word for word right, but it was something along the lines of like, I wish everybody was rich and famous so they'd realize that it wasn't all it's cracked up to be. And I think that's such a nice message from someone that is rich and famous, so that the other people that look up to those and glamorize that lifestyle and that career choice and all that stuff can maybe sit back and say, wait, it's not, because that is the perception. Like, I want to be a big, famous, rich movie star, that it's every little kid's dream, right? Wouldn't that be cool to be the Tom Cruise in the Matrix or whatever, right? Whatever you like. And I think it was really cool for him to say that and kind of stick with that philosophy. For the up and comers.
I think I agree. And I think the other thing I would add to that is that it's lonely. I think that people really underestimate how the more successful you get in this business, the more people are attracted to you for the wrong reasons, the more people you have to wade through. And I'm someone who approaches everything with an open heart to a fault. So there has been times throughout my journey. Exactly. There's been times throughout my journey where people have wanted to be friends with me or in relationships with me. And then it was discovering that they had, ulterior motives and that they thought that they could get something from me and they thought that it could help them in some way. And so that starts to feel very isolating. I can't imagine what it would be like on his level. I know what it's like on mine and which is a far lower scope. And that's been difficult. And then of course it's about finding, who are the people you're close with. This is why I'm very close to some of my Superstore castmates, that those are like my inner circle. It's also my Canadian friends that I know from back home who live here, or other Canadians that I've met through other people. Your circle starts to become very precious to you. And it's also difficult. It's difficult, which in a way that I never would have anticipated. I would have always thought the opposite, that it's like when you're that rich and that famous, you have everyone in the world wants to be friends with you. But what you realize is when you're that rich and you're that famous, everyone in the world wants to be friends with you. And it's not because it's you.
Right. They want to socially climb, or they want to use you, or, you're a leverage point for something, or you're a name drop at a party, or you're a flex, or
Exactly. And then it becomes an existential thing where it's like your value is your success and your work and your comedy. That becomes what it starts to feel like is your value to others. And so then it can kind of come back to you and go, is that my only value? Is that all I offer?
Right.
That's only one facet of who I am. Right.
Huh. You're very self-aware to be thinking about all this stuff. And I mean, you probably lived it. Like, is LA and Hollywood, is there a lot of this in that culture? Like, for someone that's never been there, I feel like it's a social climbing buffet, and it's just a step on each other to get ahead, and kind of a shit show. And maybe that's a pessimistic approach, but is that kind of what goes on in Hollywood?
Absolutely. And I think at every level, that's the thing here is everybody wants what you have, no matter where you are. Right. So if you're just starting out and you're doing a guest star role on something and that's the height of the stuff you've booked, there's somebody who wants that.
Right.
And there's a hunger that can come with being here, which on one hand is like great and inspirational and all the above. But on the other hand is cutthroat and competitive, and people will throw you under the bus. People will pretend to be your friend. I literally was in a long-term relationship. And at the end, he said to me, I was only with you to try and further my career.
Oh, man.
Like literally. So it's a really bizarre place. I always say like Hollywood, LA, it's like its own universe. There's nowhere else like it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you can get very easily sucked into those kind of more superficial worlds.
Yeah.
And the first couple of years I was here, I definitely had like a wild ride where I was running with some very famous people through chance, which was fascinating. And then I was kind of like, I think I'm good. I think I'm good on that.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to do me. And I think I'm going to hang out at my house a lot, and I'm going to have a small group of friends, and I'm going to be close to the people that I think value me as a human. And I'm going to do the things for work and go to the events that I need to, but I'm not going to get caught up in that scene. I can't do it. It's too much.
Wow. Well, that's really refreshing to hear. And I think that it's important for you to vocalize that often, because there's got people like me that have that perception that everyone, I mean, I knew you weren't because I knew you before, but like generally speaking, most people in those environments are like that. And it's really nice to see that you've seen it firsthand, realize you didn't want it, because again, the dreamers and things grow up and they just say, well, geez, I'll sell my soul to be a part of that, you know. And it's nice that you had a taste of it and you realized that it wasn't for you. You know, I think that's an important message to convey to the up and coming, you know, dreamers.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I would offer on that note is I think social media makes people perceive the lives of actors in a way that is like, we all have to remember, I know it's like not a new concept, but like you're really seeing a curated highlight reel, you know, like it was just award season here. So I went to 3 parties, which is a part of my job. It's very fun, but it is a part of my job. It's, you know, you gotta do it. And, people look at that and go, oh my God, you've been going to events for months and you're doing all these things. And I'm like, no, it was 3 nights. It was 3 nights out of the past month. And the rest of the time I'm getting up at 4:00 in the morning to drive an hour to go to work to shoot and then come home and lay on my couch like a zombie and then get up and do it again. Like, you know, like again, the perception of a Hollywood life or what it is or what it looks like. People just need to remember that you were, I mean, I could document all of that and put it on the internet, but first of all, that sounds exhausting. And second of all, that's just not a part of it. And there has to be places where you can also feel like you don't have to share all of your life and all of the above. But just remembering that it's like for every glamorous photo of a very fun, glamorous night out, there's probably 90 nights that are not like that, if not more.
Right.
You know, probably way more actually. It's a job like anything else.
That said, because that certainly is the perception of like, you know, the stars are going to these events and they're always wearing something nice on some kind of red carpet somewhere, you know. That said, like if 90% of the reality is you're, you know, grinding, does it become kind of awkward at those events where, because you're not interacting as much as we perceive you are. So like star 1 and star 2 bump shoulders at the red carpet. Like, is it like awkward or
it can be? Yeah. It can be. It depends, you know, like it can be fun. Like I like sitting back and like I was at a party once a year ago and it was like Oscar Isaac and Sebastian Stan were talking and I just watched them because I was like, because I'm a fan too, right? Like that's the other thing. Like you're always going to be somebody that's a fan of you. You're always going to be a fan of somebody, like, right. You know, so there's that element, which is kind of cool. But like, you know, then I'm standing waiting for my car to come at the valet beside Oscar Isaac. And it's like, do you make conversation? Do you not? Right. Do you smile? Do you not? Like it's, so
what do you do? What do you do?
I mean, it depends on the person. It depends on who it is. If I feel really moved, then I might, you know, say something or spark a conversation. But like, I think that's the other thing to remember is like, for someone like me, and I can only speak to my own experience, obviously, but for someone like me, like I am a nerdy kid who grew up in Belleville. And so that's still who I am. I just have a really unique kind of high profile job, which also, by the way, isn't as high profile as it could be. But you know, there's all of it feels surreal. All of it feels awkward. All of it feels bizarre. Right. And sometimes you'll have experiences at those events that are really fun and wild and memorable, but ultimately it is still work. You're still there as a representative and an ambassador of whatever show you're working on at the time. You're still there, you know, and by the way, too, people also don't perceive like, I also have to pay for everything. I'm not getting anything for free. I'm paying for my hair and makeup. I'm paying for my styling. I'm paying for the clothes. Like that's another interesting piece of being at the level that I'm at, is that I'm not famous enough that people are sending me all this stuff for free. Right. But I'm also at a level where I see the value and there is an expectation of me to go and be present at these things. So then I'm like, well, it's an investment. It's an investment into me and my career and all of the above. But yeah, that's the other thing too, is that it's like, you got to spend a lot of money to do things that make it feel like to the public, you're super glamorous and being given all these opportunities. You know, it's all a construct. Like all of it is, none of it's real. Right. None of it's real. And I mean, that's obviously also like can sound pessimistic, and I don't mean it pessimistically. It's just when you get on the other side, when you see behind the curtain, you go, oh, this is all bullshit. that we
I wondered all that. Yeah, I wondered that.
Yeah. It's a wild ride, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it almost feels like a game. And if you don't play the game, you're not going to get the opportunities.
Right. And so you have to decide how the game's going to work for you.
Right.
Because I was in the game to a point for a long time where it was like, I need a break. Like, this is exhausting.
Yeah.
You have to decide, you have to try and make your own rules in that game.
Right. And if it's inauthentic, it will exhaust you over time.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something I applaud you for, is like, we've chatted a handful of times and you've always come off as very, very authentic. And maybe that's because you're Canadian, I don't know, but it feels really good, because as I age up and mature and, I have more life experiences, I can kind of smell bullshit a lot easier than I could, when I was younger or whatever, or maybe I didn't even care about bullshit when I was younger, but now it's important to me, and authenticity and being surrounded by good quality people and being in touch with good quality people is something that is really important to me. So it's really refreshing to talk to you and hear these things out and realize that you've been there, realize certain parts of it weren't for you. And, you can kind of see it as something separate than just yourself. Like, this is what's going on. This is how I am going to interact and engage with the construct, right? Which I like that you use that word, the construct of this world and this game. And this is how I'm going to dip my toes into it, instead of just blindly selling your soul, like I feel like a lot of people do in that industry.
Absolutely. That's well said. That's I feel like that's exactly it.
Yeah. No, that's cool. You're one of the good ones. I have a list of things I want to talk about, and I haven't got to half of them. Like, we haven't got to your music. We haven't talked about Not Dead Yet. Yeah. We haven't talked about even like your stand-up and stuff. Like, there's so much. I'm not going to take up any more of your time because it's already been an hour and a half, but there's so much like that we didn't even get to.
Listen, I'll have to come back. We'll have to do a part 2.
I was half shy to ask you to come back because I know your time is valuable, but I would love to have you back. Cause like I said, I'm looking at my little point form little list here, and I got not even through half of it. So I feel like there's so much more we could cover. Yeah. Or the podcast. We never even talked about the podcast either.
I know. Listen, there's so much else to talk about, like constructs and being authentic people, which is always more interesting anyway. Right. So I love it. I love it. Yeah. We'll get to all of it. We'll have to.
And I thought of you because a week or two ago, I interviewed somebody that creates these really cool prefab homes. And I know that we like talked about like, the HGTV thing and whatever. So there's a lot to talk about. And I talked to him about it, I didn't mention your name, but I talked to him about, because he builds these crazy like Scandinavian prefabs, and then he has to deliver them, and he delivers them to the like craziest places and weirdest circumstances, like on the side of like a mountain or something. He'd have to deliver these homes. So he mentioned that he was interested in maybe doing an HG TV thing, and it made me think of you just based on what we talked about, a year or so ago.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Listen, we got to reopen that conversation.
We do. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Heck yeah.
I would. That would be really cool. But I love it. We'll have to save that for another time. And I would love to have you on again. If if you don't have the time, I totally understand. But I would love to have you on, because I feel like there's a lot more that we got to cover.
Absolutely. No, it'd be my pleasure. I love it. It's been great talking to you.
It's been fantastic talking to you. So the last thing I'll ask you is, where can everybody find you? Where can they find your socials, the TV shows and all the projects you're working on, your music, your podcast, all that stuff? Yeah. Yeah.
So Instagram, Lauren Elizabeth Ash, TikTok, Lauren Elizabeth Ash. Those are the big ones. My show, Not Dead Yet, is coming back February 7th on ABC and Hulu in the States. My music, I just released a new single like a week and a half ago, called The One Who Got Away. You can stream that anywhere that music's available. And my podcast is True Crime and Cocktails, which is available everywhere as well. So there's lots of places to check me out. There's got to be one of these things that interests you, folks. So pick your lane and then find some Lauren Ash content.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The Sawyer Hannay Show.